Hello, hello. Welcome again to the Rotten Horror Picture Show, the horror movie podcast where we talk about films off the Rotten Tomatoes 200 Best Horror Movies of All Time list. Excuse me. My name is Clay. With me, as always, is Amanda. How you doing, Amanda?
I mean, I'm stuck in my private trap, but otherwise I'm fine. Thank you.
What does he say? I'm stuck in I was born into my trap.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't want to get out though. No, I do.
Yeah, I don't mind it anymore.
But I do.
But I do.
That's right. We are talking about Psycho today.
Are we going to have the stabbing noises and the strings happen right now?
No. Too much production. This is number 7 on our list. We did number 6 last time with Get Out, and this is...
Are we working?
Yep, we're going.
Okay. Sorry.
This is one number worse than Get Out, according to that list.
One number worse? Mm-hmm. Huh.
Yeah. Anyway.
A moment of silence for that list.
It has a 97% Rotten Tomatoes score, 95% audience score.
Mm-hmm.
We recently recorded Halloween, the first episode for our Patreon this year. And I practically insulted you by asking you if you had seen Halloween before.
Yes.
So much like that movie, I will change my phrasing.
I thought you were going to say, I will insult you again.
I will insult you again. First of all, how dare you?
Yes.
Second of all, what is your history with Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho?
I feel like this is a movie where I had seen bits and pieces of it way before I had seen the whole thing. I think like a lot of people in our general age group, a little older and a little younger, where you're just sort of aware of it. It's out there. It's on all the best of lists. And then I'm pretty sure it's one of the movies that my aunt and uncle let me see when they were babysitting us.
Nice.
And yeah, I don't really remember exactly how old I was, but it's just sort of been around. I did not love it when I first saw it. I thought it was boring.
Nice.
Other than the exciting parts, obviously.
Nice. Well,
but it grew on me.
I had a very similar experience. Psycho's one of those movies that's just ubiquitous to the culture at this point.
Yes.
In the same way that Jaws becomes, or
totally
even Halloween to an extent.
Yeah.
This is one of those movies where you might be able to, if you go through The Simpsons, piece the entire movie together based on times that The Simpsons have. Like, that's the first time I saw Citizen Kane, was watching the first 5 seasons of The Simpsons.
Oh, me too. Definitely. 100%.
And this might be one where you can do something similar. It is very oft referenced, obviously. But yeah, the first time I don't think I saw this until I was older, actually. I do like that your aunt and uncle showed it to you, because every now and then you get one of those movies from the 60s, quote unquote, where you're whoever's watching you is like, that's from the 60s. Yeah. I can show it to my
This is art.
Young ward.
Yeah. There's no gore in it. There's no nudity.
It's black and white.
There's like a suggestion of sex, but there's no like overt sex scene. So if you're like 12, here you go. Yeah. Have fun, kid.
Yeah, and at that point as an adult, you have no comprehension of how little it takes to terrify a child.
But like I said, I mostly found it boring.
That's true. It could go either way.
Yeah, I think I was old enough that I was sort of expecting it to be more slasher movie-ish, and I was disappointed at the time. It wasn't until I came back to it much, much later that I was like, holy shit, this movie is amazing.
Yeah, I think it's, and we'll get into this, I think you have to be on the same wavelength with Hitchcock for his stuff to work for you.
Yeah.
Because much like The Birds, I didn't really care for this the first time. Well, I liked the beginning up through the murder. And then basically every time I've watched this movie, except for recently, it's been everything up through the murder is great. And then I check out for about 15 minutes until they find the mother.
Yeah.
Because that's just such a, well, we'll get into it.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
I've come around to the rest of it, and I think it's one of those things where, if you are on the same wavelength as what the movie's doing, I think it works a lot better.
Yeah, and it requires like a little bit more attention than I think your standard 12-year-old is willing to give it.
Yeah. But we will get into all of that in a minute. We'll take a quick break. We're going to play at least some of the trailer because this movie's original trailer is 6.5 minutes long.
Wow.
And it is...
You really pad out the episode.
I know, I could. We'll see how long we go talking, and then I'll make my decision. The original trailer, I might use one of those like fan-made recut things and not attribute it to anybody because I'm a trash person. But you know what? It's copyright material. You shouldn't have done it in the first place. You know? No, the original trailer is 6.5 minutes, and it's 6.5 minutes of I almost said
strings and screaming.
No, it's actually Alfred Hitchcock walking around the set, explaining the movie, but not in like a spoilery way. It's just like it starts with him. Well, I'll play.
Good evening.
Yeah, it starts with him outside the hotel, and he's like, "This is a motel, but it now has become the scene of the crime."
Yeah,
like that kind of thing.
Got it.
And this room is where they found the body, like that kind of thing. Just kind of hyping it up. Real William Castle shit, which we'll get into a bit later too. So we're gonna play a little bit of something for you, and then we'll be back to talk about Psycho.
Here we have a quiet little motel, when in fact it has now become known as the scene of the crime.
You have a vacancy?
Oh, we have 12 vacancies.
You know, this is the first place that looks like it's hiding from the world.
I think that we're all in our private traps, clamped in them. And none of us can ever get out.
Is anyone at home?
Oh, that must be my mother.
Is anything wrong?
Am I acting as if there's something wrong?
She's not missing so much as she's run away.
Put me down. Mother! Oh, God! Mother!
What are you running away from?
She looked like a wrong one to you?
It's not as if she were a maniac. She just goes a little mad sometimes.
Why, she wouldn't even harm a fly.
All right, Psycho, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, written by Joseph Stefano, based on the novel by Robert Bloch, starring Anthony Perkins, Janet Leigh, Vera Miles, John Gavin, Martin Balsam, and the music of Bernard Herrmann. Amanda, what happens in Psycho?
Phoenix secretary Marion Crane, on the lam after stealing $40,000 from her employer in order to run away with her boyfriend, is overcome by exhaustion during a heavy rainstorm. Traveling on the back roads to avoid the police, she stops for the night at the ramshackle Bates Motel and meets the polite but highly strung proprietor Norman Bates, a young man with an interest in taxidermy and a difficult relationship with his mother.
Yes. All true.
All true. Well, Clay, some things you'll find in Psycho include... crime bra.
Crime bra. You know it's crime time when she's wearing the black bra, baby.
Crime bra. Every woman has one. The first on-screen toilet flush on American film.
This is true. Up until then, it was not. I don't think it was a direct rule that you couldn't show a toilet, but it was like heavily preferred by the ratings board and the Hays Code or whatever.
Maybe not explicit, but certainly implied.
Yeah, and apparently the writer was like, "We're putting a toilet in the movie.
Yeah,
I don't care." And Alfred Hitchcock said, "Well, write it into the movie. That's how it gets in the movie." And so that's what he did.
All right. The relief of the cop behind you getting off the highway.
Yeah, that's probably one of the most relatable things in the movie.
Yes.
After she gets pulled over and then she's driving away and the cop is still behind her and her constantly checking her mirror.
The music is still kind of intense and then he pulls off and it like, yes. Relief. Extreme memory foam mattress.
Yes. I don't know.
It remembers every time anybody has ever laid on it.
It's like a Looney Tunes cartoon when they go through the wall.
Or like down through the pavement or something.
Yeah. You see that impression right before it goes doo, boing, and throws you through the ceiling.
And questionable mothering.
Questionable mothering.
And I say it that way because we technically never get to meet Mrs. Bates. So we don't know what kind of parent she was, but we do know that in this movie, Mother is quite bad.
That's true.
Yeah.
Very bad.
Very bad, yes.
Sounds like her boyfriend wasn't that great either, you know? But
I
who's
don't
to
know.
say?
We really only have Norman's word for it, so
yes.
Who knows?
This movie, Hitchcock did this movie on a small budget using a crew that was basically from the Alfred Hitchcock TV show. Mm-hmm. And after he was fed up with his big budget movies, he had just done Vertigo, which was considered a flop or a disappointment anyway.
Huh.
And North by Northwest, which was a success, but also very expensive.
Yeah.
And it was also a bit in response to Clouseau's Diabolique, which is another low-budget black and white movie thriller that critics said out-Hitchcocked Hitchcock.
And
so
you can't let that stand.
Yeah, he decided to one-up the man.
Up the ante a little bit for the next, 50, 60, 70 years.
Yes. And also he was known to have said, there's so many bad movies, bad B movies that do well that are in black and white. Mm-hmm. What would happen if someone made a good one? And so here we are with Psycho.
Wow.
So getting into Psycho, I have one question.
Yes.
Is Ed Gein one of the most influential people of the 20th century?
That's a very interesting question. I mean, yeah. I think if you take his pop culture legacy, absolutely, because you get this and Texas Chainsaw and
Silence of the Lambs.
Silence of the Lambs.
There's another movie called Deranged from the 70s, but nobody knows what that is.
Yeah. But this Psycho, Texas Chainsaw, and Silence of the Lambs are so huge. Like they're all such movies that have had such an enormous impact and are so widespread.
Yeah.
That I think, if you want to just count his sort of more diffuse impact, then yes. But I do think a lot of people don't realize it.
I agree. It's also, I can't remember how many, did he actually kill anybody?
He killed, I think 2 people for sure.
Okay.
But the others, there's 1 or 2 where there's like a question if he killed his brother. Some people say he did. Some people say it was an accident. There was never really anything known. But I think he killed, I know he killed like a local bartender and like a shop owner as well, I'm pretty sure. And then he robbed a bunch of graves.
Okay.
Yeah.
Victimless crime.
Yeah.
Well, the reason I ask is because he also kind of invented the serial killer. As far as, obviously he didn't do that on purpose, but like the concept, the modern understanding of what a serial killer is, tends to go back to him. Yeah,
the sort of psychosexual type of serial killer that people think of when they think of serial killer.
Yeah. And he features big in the book Mindhunter, which is about the creation of the BAU or the
the behavioral analysis.
Yeah, I can't remember which one is from Criminal Minds and which one's from the book.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's this really odd figure who did some horrible shit.
Yeah.
And sort of became the boogeyman for an entire country.
Yeah.
To the point where it's been...
He was the Butcher of Plainfield, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't that it?
That's a cool name.
Yeah.
What do I got to do to get a name like that?
Well...
Let me get my pen and paper.
You need to kill at least 2 middle-aged or older ladies.
No problem.
And then desecrate your mother's corpse. Make yourself a woman suit and live as a crazed hermit who only lets young boys come to his house to look at his cool stuff. You seemed okay with step 1, which is a little disconcerting. It seemed to only be when it got real weird that you put this dream aside.
Guess I will go back to the drawing board for that one. I would like to also say that one of the greatest moments of my life was at the Halloween party we were at this past year.
Oh.
When Ed Gein came up in conversation.
Uh-huh.
and our friend Sean said, "Who's Ed Gein?" And then without missing a beat, our friend Pat and myself, who are one of our first sort of real bonding things, weirdly enough, was American Psycho. At the exact same time said the Maitre d' Canal Bar, which is in the movie. It said, Ed Gein, who's that? Maitre d' Canal.
Yep.
Anyway, moving on. Movie's not on the list anymore. It doesn't matter.
Oh.
Yeah, but this is based on the book Psycho, which is by Robert Bloch, that was influenced by the crimes of Ed Gein, and it has the Ed Gein to the book to the movie to everything that comes after the movie. It has a really fascinating legacy of dissemination through pop culture in a really interesting way. We, as I said, we just covered Halloween, and I had mentioned that Halloween is sort of the three really important movies that come in this right before Halloween are Black Christmas, The Exorcist, and Texas Chainsaw. But you really can't leave out Psycho.
Yeah,
because
Psycho's like one more generation. Ahead.
Yeah, and I think the thing that Psycho brings is a lot of the suspense and definitely the use of the music.
Yeah.
I don't think you get the soundtrack. I don't think you get the soundtrack to Halloween without The Exorcist, but even more so, I don't think you get it without Psycho. So all that being said, this movie happens. I'm kind of winging it here, so feel free to steer the ship.
Never.
This movie happens at a really interesting point in movie history because it's 1960. Horror movies through the 50s. We've left the Universal monster period,
right?
And now we're into the 50s where it's a lot of sci-fi stuff. It's a lot of Godzillas. You're them. Attack of the
50-foot woman or 500-foot woman or whatever.
It's a lot of atomic age stuff.
Yes.
And I think one of the things that people say about Halloween is that it brought the horror to your neighborhood. And I think Psycho does something very similar because after 10 years or so of monsters and werewolf.
Well, you've gone from the supernatural to the science fiction.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then this comes out, and this is literally the guy next door.
Yeah.
And it's shocking in 100 different ways.
Yeah.
And it's where do you want to start?
I don't know. I think there's so many places you could start. We have and we're going to have to gloss over all the movies that this has had an impact on because, we just chatted a little bit about how it kind of led into Halloween, but also more modern films. We did Get Out recently. There's a lot of Psycho in Get Out.
True.
There's a lot of that suspense and that slow sort of like, why are people acting so strange and traveling away from your home to a place that is conceptually familiar, like a motel. Motels are familiar, but when you're there, if you've never been there before, it's a strange place. That whole thing. Greg and I recently watched X.
Nice.
And there's a lot of Psycho in X.
Really?
Oh yeah.
I don't remember that.
There's a lot. There's the car in the swamp.
Oh sure.
So the car sunk in the swamp. The preserved body in the basement.
Yep.
A crazy murderous old lady. This sort of codependent, unhealthy relationship.
Yep.
You can see so much of it. If you start looking for Psycho in any horror movie post Psycho, you're gonna find it, I feel like. And I don't know how much of that is Hitchcock's influence on everything that came afterwards, but also he did such a great job of harnessing these sort of universal fears and making them feel real. Like making a situation that there isn't a monster, there isn't an alien, there's no demon coming up from hell to attack you. These are just people. These are people who, for various reasons, have made choices and done horrible things at times.
Right. And we were talking as we were watching it. I mentioned that the structure of it even kind of reminded me of Barbarian.
Yeah.
Which is obviously there's some differences, but
yes,
it has a similar kind of thing in Barbarian through the interaction with the girl and Bill Skarsgård up through the big turn.
And you're in an unfamiliar house.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. And then
I think
midpoint turn and
where and similarly, Norman Bates also turns into a giant hag monster.
Yeah.
But I think the structure is an interesting place to start because that's really the thing. So I've watched in the last handful of months, I've watched 3 Hitchcock movies. I've watched Psycho, Vertigo, and The Birds. And all 3 of those movies kind of do the same thing. Where for the first half, I find myself going, what the hell is this movie?
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a bad way.
Yeah.
Like I recently, I had seen Vertigo years ago. I think I probably talked about this before, but I had gone, it was playing down the street. And so I went to see it having pretty much forgotten about what happened in it. And I found myself watching the movie being totally enthralled by the first half of it, but going like, I don't know where this is going.
Yeah.
I have no idea what this is building to. And then when it gets to what it's building to, it knocks you for such a loop that the rest of the movie, which gets real weird.
Yeah.
Like you're off kilter for the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
And I think The Birds does the same thing where The Birds is like, you're watching this movie about this woman who's kind of stalking this guy. And then about halfway...
It seems like it's going to be like an unconventional romance.
Right.
Like a comedy of manners kind of thing.
Yeah. And then about halfway through it, birds start killing people for no reason. That one at least, it's kind of on the poster. Like, that's coming.
Yeah.
But with Psycho, I found myself wondering... There are certain things that I feel... We talked about this in Halloween as well, where... it's become so ubiquitous that it doesn't have... You kind of forget how innovative it was.
Yeah.
And how scary it probably was.
Yep.
There's this performance of Black Sabbath playing the song War Pigs from Paris in 1972, from like right after the album came out.
Oh, wow.
It's one of the best live performances I've ever seen. And my friend Dan and I will... periodically send it back and forth to each other.
Yeah.
And every time I'm like, could you imagine going into a club or wherever they were playing and hearing War Pigs for the first time?
Yeah.
You wouldn't know what to do with yourself.
Absolutely.
I understand why people were like, this is devil music. This is the music of Satan. And I think this movie does such a good job of literally the first half of the movie, because Marion Crane gets killed at right about the halfway mark.
Yeah.
Of giving you it builds its tension, but it's such a unfocused tension where it's just like, maybe that unfocused is the wrong word, but it's like a generalized tension.
Sure.
That you're on edge, but part of the reason that you're on edge is because you don't know where it's going.
Right, and when you start to think you've figured out where it's going, then Marion gets killed. Right.
And they start the movie, he does such a great job of setting up Marion as this desperate but sympathetic character. So unlike the movies this will inspire later, you're not like waiting for her to get killed.
Yeah, and that is something I kind of wanted to talk about, not to get too far away from the discussion of the structure.
It's all part of the same thing.
Yeah. I do think, and this ties into the conversation we had on the Patreon episode about Halloween.
Which you can listen to at patreon.com/thepensky-file.
Excellent.
If you'd like to join our Patreon.
Very good. And all the conversations we had about the Friday the 13th movies, all the slashers, all of these sort of descendants of Psycho.
You can listen to all those, patreon.com. I got to start pushing that stuff up front. Because I do it at the end. Like, nobody's listening to that. Anyway.
They know they can skip it.
Yeah.
But I think that Marion is the blueprint for a lot of other female victims in slasher and horror movies. She is quote unquote promiscuous. She's having sex outside of marriage.
Yeah, promiscuous by 1960s standard. Yes.
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that I actually think she is, but to the time period and the world that this movie is taking place in, she's an unmarried woman having sex with a divorced man in hotel rooms on her lunch break. That's pretty scandalous.
Yeah.
And then she's also a thief.
Yep.
So she breaks the law and she has sex and she ends up dying. And I think the thing that later movies miss out on is you spend so much time with just her in the first half of this movie. You get such a close view of her life. You're with her the whole time in the first half of the movie.
Right.
I don't think it leaves her at all until she dies.
No, yeah, she's the only, yeah.
You see her when she thinks she's alone. You see her in intimate moments. You see her kind of making these decisions and then maybe regretting them and fantasizing about what could happen and what people might be saying about her. You get such a close look into her interior life that you have to be sympathetic towards her to some extent. Yeah. You see her as a person first because you don't even expect her to become a victim.
Yeah.
So when she dies, it has a huge impact emotionally and narratively. And I feel like later on, a lot of movies took some pieces of that, but did not give the victim that level of depth of attention.
Yeah.
And for so much time.
Yeah, I think if you make this movie 20 years later, Marion is a lot harsher and probably a bit more of a floozy, so to speak.
Yeah, and I don't think she's your main character.
Yeah, maybe not.
You know, I think 20 years later in 1980, I think if she's having sex with some guy in a hotel room and stealing money from her employer and eventually getting killed mid-movie, I don't think she's going to get this sympathetic treatment, and I don't think she's going to be your real main character. You might spend some time around with her, but I think it would either be more focused on Sam or Lila. But I don't think you would get the same kind of realistic view of like she's a flawed person. She clearly makes mistakes, but I think it's easy to underestimate the immense amount of societal pressure on a woman at the time, especially to get married. And the way the opening of this movie kind of hammers, the first few scenes really hammers home that Marion is not married. She wants to be married. She has never been married. Everyone around her is getting married or has just gotten married. And she's the only one sort of in this holding pattern living with her sister. And so you can just kind of start to feel the pressure that she must have been feeling all the time from all the people around her and how this is just starting to like grate on her to a point where she can't take it anymore.
And I would like to point out at this point, if we ever start doing postcards sending out for the Patreon, I promise that I'll lick the stamps. Like even honestly, just her reading of that line.
It's so crazy, but it's so great.
Yeah, but it just has this desperation behind it that it just... Janet Leigh's performance is just so good.
Think about it. Why does she want to marry Sam?
Great question, because he sucks.
He sucks. They have very little chemistry, which blows my mind because she's Janet Leigh. I mean, look at her. They have very little chemistry. He spends his time hiding her.
Yeah.
And he's divorced. She's single. There's no reason they can't go on normal dates.
Yep.
Why haven't they? It's clear they haven't because she, in the opening scene with the two of them, she's had it. She's like, this is it. I'm not answering you anymore. We're not doing this anymore. I can't keep sneaking around. I don't want to just meet up in hotel rooms. I want to have a real date. If you want to go to dinner, it's going to be at my house with my sister. It's going to be respectable. I'm sick of this shit. So he won't really date her. He's paying his wife alimony. He's paying off his debts. He lives in the stock room behind the hardware store that he works at. He only works at a hardware store. He doesn't seem super committed to her.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't seem very... we kind of talked about this, that the first time I really remember watching this through and paying real attention to the plot and not really, so I had seen it before probably, but I hadn't registered so much. I hadn't absorbed so much. The first time I watched it through with actual attention, I remember being confused where I was like, wait, I know he comes back later in the movie, but he's with the sister. Is he really in love with the sister?
Yeah.
Like I had this weird fake memory because I couldn't stop the feeling that it felt like he was jerking Marion around.
Even still, I've seen this movie. I've watched it 3 times in the last couple months because I just got the 4K, and so I watched it and then I listened to the commentary and stuff.
Yeah.
every time I watch it, I think he's doing something shady. There's something going on here. Like,
and
it never becomes part of the movie.
And yet she is so desperate to marry him that you get that crazy line reading of, I'll lick the stamps.
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa. Like, she's gorgeous. She's clearly smart. She's got a job. She can support herself. There's no reason why Marion couldn't find someone else. So,
right.
Like, what's going on here?
What's interesting is, not that I think that you need this stuff, because I think the movie does a good job on its own, but in the book, which I read recently, they meet on a cruise, and they fall in love on a cruise, which explains why they're kind of in a long distance relationship.
Yeah.
And Sam's deal is that he is running his late father's hardware store, because when his father died, he left him the hardware store, but he also left him all the debt that came with it.
Sure.
And so he's under immense financial strain, which is a big part of why she steals the money.
Right.
And
which I think still holds true in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you get more about Marion in the movie. In the book, her name is Mary. Apparently they changed it to Marion because they found that there were 2 women in Arizona named Mary Crane.
Oh.
And they didn't want any legal problems.
They didn't want to disparage these women.
Yeah.
And,
but you get more about what her deal is. Basically, while her sister went off to college and had a life, Marion ended up having to stay at home taking care of their mother, I think.
Yeah.
So basically, her life got
put on hold.
Put on hold, yes.
Yeah.
And so by the time the mother passes away and she's free, she's like 30, I think. She's unmarried.
She's an old maid back then.
And so you get a little bit more about why she's so desperate, but
Sure.
I don't think you need that stuff. I think the movie does it very well.
Yeah. And there's another, but like, I find her characterization and Norman's so interesting.
Yeah.
And the ways in which, especially given that backstory, the ways in which they parallel one another, where it's like, you are just tied so tightly to your mother and this matriarchal figure, and you put your whole life on hold to take care of her. But there's so much, like, I'm jumping around a little bit, but I love Hitchcock's dialogue in so many of his movies because of the things that people say, but also the things that they don't.
Right.
So there's this great moment later on in the movie when we know Marion is dead, but Lila and Sam do not. They are still looking for her, and they are talking to the deputy sheriff and his wife. I think it's then, or it's either then or when they're talking to Arbogast. Might be when they're talking to Arbogast. I think it's when they are talking to the PI. And Sam, they're hearing about Marion stole this money and she ran and all this stuff. And Sam says to Lila, I just can't believe it. I can't believe she'd do something like that. Can you? And Lila doesn't answer.
Oh, interesting.
And it's like, she kind of looks at him, and then there's a beat. Like, she sort of pointedly doesn't answer. And it's like, oh, okay. So Lila's kind of like, no, I can see it.
Yeah.
Like, she knows her sister well enough to be like, yeah, maybe she would do something like this.
Well, one of the things they do really well, and I was as we were talking about this, I was trying to decide. The one thing I was thinking that I might change is I had the thought that maybe instead of the very funny other secretary who works
yes,
who I think is Hitchcock's wife or daughter.
Yeah.
I might have put Lila in that role only because it's a little weird the way that she just pops up out of nowhere.
Yeah, you sort of hear about her earlier.
Yeah, her name comes up a couple times.
Yeah, and they say your sister's going to be away all weekend, blah, blah, blah.
But the thing that actually I thought works really well is Vera Miles' performance is so starkly contrasted to Marion that you immediately know what their deal is. Like,
yes.
Lila is the sister who has her shit together and is always kind of like, Marion's in it again. And Marion is someone who is it's not that she's a fuck up or anything, but it's like she just never really got it together.
Well, and I think if we're taking the background that the novel provides as sort of assumed in the movie.
Yeah, I was just talking about in the movie, but yes.
Yeah, but I mean, like, if you're sort of thinking she has had this sort of arrested development in her life in the movie, then it makes sense that she's sort of not, that she doesn't have her shit together, because she's been very sheltered in one way or another. Right. Whether it's like she's always just kind of lived with her sister, or she's always lived with family, and she's never kind of gone out into the world. She's never really moved beyond her immediate surroundings. It's like, yeah, she has these sort of flights of fancy, maybe, or like unrealistic expectations. Like even when she drives and we kind of get her inner monologue fantasizing about what people might be saying, it implies she has this rich fantasy life in her head. Like she steals this money, this $40,000, which is a fuck ton of money back then.
I think the adjusted was like almost 400,000. I think it was like 350 or something like that. Yeah.
She steals this money with the fantasy in mind that she is going to show up at Sam's door.
Right.
And she's going to solve all of his financial problems, and then they will get to be together. Yep. Then they will be able to get married and run away together and start a new life, which, as you pointed out in the chat, is wildly unrealistic.
Well, the thing, I think in the book, I can't remember if she says this in the movie, in her inner monologue, but her inner monologue in the book, she says when she gets there, like her plan is even more insane when she in the book, because she's like, when I get to Sam, we'll get married, and then I'll sell the second car under my married name, which no one will be able to trace, because no one will be looking for a Marion Loomis. And on top of that, she's like, I won't be able to talk to my sister. I'll have to tell Sam that we need to get married right away, and that we got the money from some inheritance, and that Lila immediately went on a trip to Europe, so she can't come to the wedding. Like, it's a lot more backflipping.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's great in the movie is, like, her plan is, one of the things that I love is that she's so bad at this.
Yes.
But everybody gives her the benefit of the doubt in a weird way.
Yeah.
Where it's like they're kind of suspect.
Well, because she hasn't, in a lot of the interactions, she hasn't done anything overtly wrong.
Right.
She's just being kind of weird, and she's a pretty white lady. So it's kind of like, well, I mean, I don't know what you want me to do about her.
One of my favorite characters in the movie is the car salesman.
Yeah. Because
not only is he the most upright car salesman ever, which...
Unless that car was not worth $700.
That's true. Well, that's the other thing. When he says, like, your car plus $700, and she's like, fine. He's like, huh.
Yeah.
Like, it's that kind of stuff that I think is so...
Yeah, I think at first he makes a comment where he says, oh, but you have time to argue about money, huh?
Right, yeah.
And then she's like, no, it's fine. And he was like, oh.
Yeah. Like, that kind of stuff is so well layered in.
Yeah.
That it adds to her desperation. But even as you're watching this, you're going like, this is not good. Like, someone's going to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, because she is being so obvious. Like, even her interactions with the cop, I feel like just because of current events, social mores changing, blah, 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 people these days maybe have a slightly different attitude towards the police. But in 1959, 1960, if you're just some lady driving a car and a police officer pulls you over, or he doesn't even pull her over. She's taking a sleep. Yeah. She's taking a nap on the side of the road. That wouldn't freak you out like that.
They do present the cop in a very imposing way, though.
They
with
do,
the big sunglasses and the big close up.
But I do think her level of intense nervousness around him is remarkable.
She does talk to him the way only a white lady could talk to a cop, though.
Yeah, with a certain level of disdain and dismissiveness. But yeah, between the cop and the car salesman and just her general demeanor, even when she first gets to the motel, it's like, oh, someone's gonna know she's up to something.
And that's what's so satisfying about her death scene, maybe satisfying is not the right word, like narratively satisfying, because she gets that moment where she goes, this is ridiculous.
Yes.
This is stupid.
This is ridiculous, and this is wrong.
This is wrong.
I made a mistake.
I've talked to this very nice man.
Yes.
And
it's a very nice young man.
Very nice young man, and I have realized I have made a mistake.
Yep.
I am now going to take a literal and metaphorically cleansing shower.
Yep.
And then
put that white bra back on.
Yeah, that bra's never going on. She's
the white bra
dead.
is.
No, she gets killed.
No, I mean like her plan in her head.
Oh, sure.
I'm going to take my shower. I'm going to take off the crime bra.
Oh, right.
And put on the nice lady bra.
It would have been great if in that scene, as Norman is watching her get undressed, she does take the white one out and go, this one next. But so you've got this character who kind of goes on almost like a full arc.
Yeah.
And I think when something very innovative in pop culture or fiction or whatever comes out, usually what happens is the imitators take the wrong lesson from it.
Yeah.
If you look at every comic book that came out after The Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen, they were all dark and gritty, but they missed the point of both of those books.
Yeah, well, that was kind of my argument with like sort of Marion Crane's film Descendants.
Sure, yeah. But the other thing is like the idea of what Hitchcock does in this movie becomes such a notable thing, which is we're going to cast the name actress in the part of the woman who gets killed.
Yeah.
But what happens is like that just turns into such a weird truncated cliche.
Yeah.
And I think probably the one that works the best is Drew Barrymore in Scream.
Yep.
But even so, like that's only like a 10-minute scene.
Well, and that is sort of very quickly you realize how meta Scream is.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So it is a commentary on doing that.
Right.
Which is why it also works, is because it's taking that and sort of flipping it on its head a little bit and doing something fun with it.
But they just usually don't give this stunt casting character enough time to breathe.
Exactly.
The one where they did it, where it really kind of caught me off guard in a way that I don't think the movie was prepared. It's probably not fair, but they did it on purpose, obviously. But I don't think they handled it in a way that really lets you process what happened the way that this movie does, which was actually the Friday the 13th remake. Because they if you remember, they spend that whole movie with Danielle Panabaker as like the lead character, and then she ends up getting killed.
Yeah.
And so they're clearly doing that sort of bait and switch thing.
Yeah.
But by that point in the movie, things are happening so fast that you're just like, whoa,
right.
What is And here, when Marion gets killed, not only does all the music drop out except for the shower, and then obviously the classic, stinger.
Yeah.
The next like 10 minutes
at least are Norman Bates cleaning up the crime scene. Yes.
With no dialogue.
Yep.
And very minimal music.
Yeah.
And I have to imagine it's just like they're giving you time to process what you just watched.
Yeah.
Because no one probably was expecting this to happen.
Yeah.
And the way that death scene hits, where they go from a pretty languidly shot movie that isn't really jumping around a lot into, I think, I know I read it, but I think it's like 42 to 50 cuts in that like 40-second death scene.
Wow. Holy shit.
So it's just like a machine gun
at
your eyeballs and then your ears. And then, you're totally knocked for a loop.
Yeah.
And I find this to be, I didn't realize that this was something that he did a lot. But as I said, in Vertigo, the same thing happens in Vertigo. And even in that one, they give you a little bit of time after that to process, like, what the fuck is going on now?
Yeah, and I think that scene is so, it's so iconic and effective for so many reasons. I think one of the biggest ones is that we all bathe. We all have private time in the bathroom, in the shower. It's when we're
Tell that to my college roommate.
I thought you were going to say tell it to your dog.
Yeah, him too.
But it's when you're at your most vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're nude. You're not expecting anyone else to be in there. You think you are totally alone, and you think you have absolute privacy.
When I'm in the shower, I'm afraid to wash my hair because I might open my eyes and see someone standing there. Rockwell, somebody's watching me.
Oh my God. I thought you were going to make a reference to the, what is it? Is it the Grudge?
Oh, yeah, that too.
When Sarah Michelle Gellar is
Maybe I'm
washing her
crazy.
hair and there's a hand in it when she
Yeah.
she touches the back of her own head and feels a hand.
Maybe I'm crazy, just a little touched, or maybe I've been watching Psycho too much. That's why I always feel like someone's been watching me.
So I have just called
And I have no
social
privacy.
services. Have you taken away now? But yeah, it approaches Marion in this moment of great vulnerability, and then all those sharp cuts, like sharp, sudden, constant cuts of her getting stabbed to death and screaming, and it's being done by this figure that you don't get a good look at. You just sort of see, I don't know, the impression of some hair and like maybe a dress kind of thing, but you have no idea who this is.
Right.
You've no idea who has just barged into her room and stabbed her to death. And so it's really, this really is, like we were saying earlier, one of those movies that you can't help but think, God, what must it have been like to watch this when it was new?
I would love to know if people figured it out right away, what was going on, or if it was like, like people didn't get it until the end.
I'm wondering if there is that level of disorientation that you were talking about, where that Hitchcock is so good at, where it's not, you're unmoored and you're uncertain, and that's the way he wants it.
Yeah.
It's crafted very precisely to make you feel kind of unsure about what is going on, where is this going, what is happening. How does all this fit together? I would not be surprised if a lot of people were just so taken aback by getting to this moment of quiet and then have it devolve into this moment of brutality that you're just like completely stunned and left wondering.
Yeah. And I think another thing that Halloween takes from this is the use of sexuality. Because as we talk about on the Halloween show, Halloween has nudity in it, which is clearly meant for titillation, but it is also there because you are putting these characters in the most vulnerable position possible.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that is, I think both of those things are true in this movie as well.
Yeah.
Because Alfred Hitchcock is a little freak. And like, I think he understands that, because that's one of the things that I never appreciated about his movies, is because you think Alfred Hitchcock, Psycho, it's scary, it's this master of suspense, blah blah. You sit down, you watch these movies, they are fucking weird.
Oh yeah.
Like, and I think I agree with what you're saying. It's a lot of the stuff that is unsaid.
Yeah.
I think that Sam Loomis, kind of seeming like he's not on the up and up with her, might be intentional.
True.
Because it's one of those things where they're not explaining it. They're just putting it out there.
Right.
And so you immediately are on guard and in a state of unease.
Yes.
And the way that they handle sexuality in this movie is really interesting too, because not only with the stuff with Marion, at the beginning when she's in bed and stuff, but when you get to Norman, Norman he can't even say the word bathroom.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, he says, and then there's in there.
Right.
And she says the bathroom.
And, when Mother takes over, she starts barking about having girls and you know what happens when girls come around. And it's this psychosexual, subtext. I mean, it might be text, I don't know, but subtextual thing that is runs through the whole movie that, like when we were watching The Birds. Yeah. That movie's weird. Yes. There's a lot of weird choices that are not written on the page.
Well, and another thing that a lot of Hitchcock's work has to do with, and I think The Birds and Psycho are prime examples, is voyeurism.
Yes.
Like some form of watching and being watched. Part of what's so unsettling about The Birds is that all those birds sometimes just sit there and fucking watch you.
Right.
that can be more scary than them attacking. And in this case, we're watching Marion and she's being watched.
Right. And apparently Hitchcock specifically chose the camera lens that was whatever the numbers are involved with camera lens. It's the closest to the human eye. Specifically to amplify that idea.
Yeah, because there are so many, you know, in this movie, Marion is being looked at intensely all the time. Like Sam is kind of always gazing at her when they're together, and then when she gets to work, the oil man.
Yep.
Like when there's the scene where the oil guy is flirting with her, he can barely look away from her in that whole scene. He is like locked onto her face, even when she's looking down, or the boss is talking, or something else is happening and she's looking away. That guy is like, he cannot stop looking at her.
That's how you get women to like you, Amanda.
And then
stare at them.
Once she's left with the money, the boss sees her while she's driving. The cop watches her and follows her.
Yep.
Like, she's just constantly being observed, in that sense of suspecting and knowing that you are being looked at. And you were being scrutinized at all times. Like, you can feel it in those moments. And that's another reason why, like, the shower scene is so jarring, is because it's the first time, even in the car, she feels like she's being watched. It's kind of the first time that Marion seems to feel like, oh, okay, like I've settled everything. I've made a decision. I'm going to undo this. I'm going to go home. It's going to be okay. And I can decompress. I'm safe for now. I'm alone. And yeah, to have her be killed so violently in that moment where she thinks she's where she's kind of reached a point of peace, is like, has an extra impact to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to talk about Norman?
I would love to talk about Norman. Let's talk about Norman.
What do you think about Norman? Is this an instance of a role being too perfectly cast? Like, I feel like this is Anthony Perkins had a career after this, obviously, but this sort of dogged him a bit.
Yeah, understandably.
And it's like, I feel like this is Dracula, Bela Lugosi and Dracula level casting, where it's like so perfectly executed that you are Norman Bates for the rest of your life, no matter what you do.
Yeah, I mean, but at the same time, like, I wouldn't have wanted anyone else to do it.
Right.
Like a lesser it feels like almost any other performance in this role would have been lesser.
Yeah, I think his performance, you know, he's a young guy here.
Yeah.
And I think he is of an era of actor that is on their way up, who is a lot more naturalistic in the way they do things. Like, this is not, don't kill me if I don't say this correctly, but
I have my pitchfork ready.
I think this is only a couple years after James Dean.
Probably.
I think Streetcar Named Desire, Marlon Brando is late 50s, I think. So you're getting these guys who have this more naturalistic style of acting, who are coming up. A lot of the other actors in this movie are a little bit older and have that sort of older kind of stiffness to them.
Yeah.
But he is just so natural and just lives in this character.
Yeah, he sort of slouches. He kind of like walks around and fiddles with stuff. He munches on candy corn. Like, he's so casual. And it works so well on so many levels, but one of those levels is that he very much seems at home. Yeah. Like, he talks about, I grew up in that house. I've lived here my whole life. And you feel that from him as he kind of goes through the rooms and navigates around things, that he is very much in his element. This is his home turf. Right. And you can see it from his manner until people start poking at him.
Yeah. Yeah. They throw a lot of stuff in here too to make things a little more maybe suspicious, but just to amp up that unease, because as you were saying, Norman, he's got some red flags, but they're not, there's nothing really screaming out that this is someone you should not be alone in a room with.
Right.
There's some things that are kind of like, the kind of things that only the person watching the movie would really notice, like that Marion probably wouldn't notice, like when she's signing into the book and when she says she's from Los Angeles, he's in the process of reaching for room number 2 and then stops and reaches for room number 1's key, which I've always thought was interesting. I don't know why he does that. I don't know if something about Los Angeles made him go, you know what, I'm going to kill her.
Big
I don't
city
know.
girl.
Yeah.
Must be no good.
The other one that I thought was interesting was when it's time to eat, he specifically like balks at eating in her room.
Yes.
Which I was reading that as he doesn't want to eat in the killing room. You know, like that's or I don't know, but there's something about something in his nervousness or
I think it's being that close to a bed.
Maybe that's probably true too. Yeah,
that close to a bed with a beautiful woman in this sort of casual. Because again, eating is a social ritual. Eating is something we do with friends and family and loved ones. It's how we often connect with people. And I think doing something that can read as intimate right next to a bed with her right there probably was like, this is a man who can't even say bathroom.
Right.
Like,
he would
like
being alone in a room with a woman with the door shut, you know.
Right. Whereas like we can go into the office and then into the back parlor where all my birds can watch us.
Right.
So we're not alone. All the birds are here.
Yeah. Interestingly, in the book, they actually go up to the house to eat.
Which is initially what he invites her to do in the movie, yeah.
And he actually has like a big spread of food.
Oh.
And he watches her eat, and he's like, I'm not hungry.
Yeah.
And I couldn't help but think, like, I feel like that has to be Dracula influence, because it has a very similar feel of Jonathan Harker coming to the castle and eating while Dracula, you know,
watches.
I don't drink wine. That whole thing.
Yo nunca bebo vino.
What?
It's I never drink wine, but in Spanish.
Oh.
Gotta watch Spanish language Dracula. It's so good.
I actually have not ever watched the whole thing.
we gotta do that. It's gonna be one of my wild cards.
I definitely will watch it, but anytime I watch it, I find Spanish Dracula to be a little bit too telenovela.
Oh, come on. That's how Dracula should be.
I know.
Are you saying that Bela Lugosi reads to you as natural and relaxed?
Yeah. He's my platonic ideal.
Makes sense why you always wear that cape. But yes, the eating, the watching someone else eat too. It is sort of an intimate moment, and by not participating, you're kind of drawing a little bit of a line between the two of you.
Right.
You know, it separates you. You're not sharing a meal. You're watching someone else eat.
Right.
Which, when you think about it, is very weird. Like,
yes.
It's very weird to sit and watch someone else do this sort of biological process in front of you while you observe them.
Right.
It's
it's less weird in like movies when someone is eating and someone comes, like if it's someone like, come on, I just got to finish my, like that doesn't feel weird. But when someone brings you food, like in their home, and then is like, please, I'll just watch.
Yes.
That's when it gets weird.
Again, it goes back to the voyeurism thing.
Yeah.
Where he wants to watch her. He doesn't want to actually engage with her on any sort of intimate level, but he wants to watch her.
You know what's kind of surprising, given the way that they set up his taxidermy thing?
Yeah.
It's a little surprising he doesn't keep the body. Maybe that's a little too much for 1960.
That might be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But doesn't that kind of like make sense where, I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, he kills her. Puts her in the trunk. Another,
Yep.
You know, one of the things that Hitchcock does is he doesn't have a lot of he's totally okay reminding the audience that you're watching a movie.
Yeah.
And like he doesn't really adhere to realism as much as you might think. And every now and then he'll throw things in that are very either unrealistic on purpose or just like very hand of the creator type stuff.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And one of my favorite ones is when he moves the camera through the room to specifically push in on the newspaper.
Uh-huh.
Because the money is such a great little, I don't even know if you'd call it a MacGuffin, but it's...
Yeah, for like half the people in the movie it kind of is, but...
Yeah, because you've got this moment where Norman's... It's just another great bit of suspense building, because Norman's cleaning everything up, and he leaves the room after he's pushed in on the money. Mm-hmm. And so you start thinking, oh shit, he's not going to see the money. But then he comes in and he gets it.
Yeah.
But he doesn't look at it.
Right.
He throws it into the car.
Right, which he then rolls into the swamp.
And that ends up being his undoing, kind of, because they all, Loomis and Lila, think that Norman took the money.
Yeah.
And he doesn't even know it's there.
Well, and they think that would be... Everyone thinks that would be the perfect motivation.
Right.
And... the fact that he is unaware that the money even exists means that he doesn't really anticipate that all these people are going to come looking for this girl.
Yeah.
Like, getting one person coming through looking for her, maybe he wouldn't have been shocked, but like, people keep showing up and really insistently looking for this girl. And I'm guessing he did not anticipate that. Like, if he thought she was from, whether it was LA or Phoenix or whatever, if he's thinking she's from the city and she's kind of unattached, she's just out in the world on her own, no one's going to come looking for her.
Yeah.
So then to all of a sudden have these people showing up all the time, being like, hey, have you seen this woman? He's clearly not prepared for it.
Yeah.
His conversation with Arbogast, he's just as bad a criminal as Marion was.
Yes.
Like,
well,
he's
that's what
so
kills me.
bad at covering. He's so good at cleaning up the crime scene, in the way that a person who spent his entire life cleaning up motel rooms would probably be.
Yeah.
But then he is so bad at like reining himself in. He keeps giving himself away when it comes to Marion. Over and over again, he can't stop himself from talking. And that is what gets him in trouble.
Well, he seems to get specifically extra nervous when men talk to him. Because men they tend to be a bit more aggressive. Arbogast isn't really that aggressive. Loomis is pretty aggressive.
Arbogast is friendly but insistent.
Yeah.
Like, there's a whole exchange where Arbogast wants to talk to his mother and they keep talking over each other.
Right,
like, Arbogast, he's like, no, it'll just be for a minute. I understand that she's not well. I'm not saying I want to do anything. I just need to go up and just talk to her for a couple minutes, and he won't let it go until Norman says, frankly, I have to ask you to leave now.
Yeah.
And it gets to a confrontational point. It
kills me how bad not that I've thought about this or anything, but
oh god,
I always find it so funny when these criminals get into this situation where if they had just told the truth and changed one element, it would not be an issue. If he had just said, yeah, she came through here, I think that I've seen this woman, she signed a fake name.
Yep.
And then she stayed one night and she left, and that was it. Like,
even we had, she was hungry and I made some sandwiches and we talked for a little while and it sounded like she was going to go back home.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah. But I think Norman is not accustomed to talking to people.
Right. They imply that he's done this a few times. He's killed a few people.
Yeah.
But it's probably, he probably has a barometer for people who are not going to be missed.
Right, right. And people who come by themselves to this little motel and stay the night are, again, they're vulnerable. They think they're alone. They think they are having a private moment. When somebody like Arbogast shows up and his job is to find things out. Like, he's not there as a customer. He's kind of used to dealing with people who don't want to talk to him. His whole job is to get people to talk to him. So he maybe, is better at knowing, I'm going to keep pushing. This person seems uncomfortable, but I'm going to keep pushing through it because it doesn't bother me. But Norman, watching Norman talk to Arbogast or Sam Loomis versus his conversations with Marion, it's really striking. The difference between how he will speak to a woman by herself versus how he will speak to a man.
Yeah.
Like, he takes a defensive stance almost immediately
Yeah.
when there's another guy involved.
I would take a defensive stance with Sam Loomis too, because
he
he
just
talks
showed
to
up and was like, "Hey."
he talks to Norman the way that no human would ever talk to another person. Where he's like, when Lila, they're trying to figure out what to do, and he's like, "Lila, go check out the house. Don't worry. I'll keep Norman occupied." And he goes into the office and he's like, "You killed her, didn't you?
Yeah.
You had to keep her for yourself." And Norman's like, "What are you talking about, buddy?"
It's like, whoa. Oh, God. It's
He
so
turns
funny.
into Dr. Sam Loomis for a second there.
Yeah. There was something else I had wanted to say about Norman, and I lost my train of thought.
No, hopefully we'll come back. Yeah. After they get let me say after they one more time. After she gets killed, we move into the section of the movie where I usually check out. Because it's so, the thing about this movie is like after that scene, how the hell do you keep people engaged? Like either everybody's on edge or like it's such a dip. And I don't mean that like in quality. It's just like you're emotionally and like your adrenaline is at such a big hit that like for the next 15 minutes when it's like three people talking about where Marion could have gone, part of me is like, all right, let's go. When does he stab the guy and knock him down the stairs, you know?
I mean, I think part of it is, like you were saying, that kind of giving people a minute or more than a minute, a little bit of time to process everything they've just seen.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get to the point where you are stuck wondering, oh my God, is he going to get away with this?
Right. Yeah.
And who killed her? Because at that point, somebody showed up and killed Marion.
Right. Yes.
You don't know who. And then Norman yells from the house, "Mother, you're covered in blood." So you're like, oh shit, Norman's mother killed Marion.
Mm-hmm.
So then you think Norman is covering for his insane mother.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there's something a little bit weird about this guy. But if he's covering for his mother, he's not bad. I mean,
right.
you know, it for so much of the movie, he's in, this is kind of what I was going to say, I think. For so much of the movie, he and Marion are really two sides of a very similar coin.
Okay.
Where they are doing bad things, but for reasons that you can sympathize with.
Yes.
Marion steals a lot of money that's not hers. But you can kind of sympathize with her. Like her dreams are altruistic, and she thinks she's stealing from this guy who's walking around saying, "I never carry more cash with me than I can afford to lose."
Right. Yep.
So she's like, all right, it'll be fine. And this will change my life and change Sam's life, and we'll be able to be together, and everything will be great. And then with Norman, at least if you don't know how this movie ends.
That's why I never carry more than 45 to 50 cents on me at any given time.
That's all you can afford to lose. If you think that Norman's mother has killed Marion, then Norman is doing what he's doing to protect his mom.
Yes.
Which might, again, like Marion, that might be the wrong thing to do, but it's very sympathetic if he is protecting his elderly, mentally ill mother from the consequences of her very heinous actions. So you kind of want to, I don't know, there's a moment where it's a little bit like, you don't want him to get away with it, but at the same time, there's tension on both sides. Like, are they going to catch him? Do you want them to catch him?
Right.
And, you know, what happens if they show up and the mother kills somebody else? So I think that's kind of what's supposed to propel you through the second half of the movie is, oh shit, is Norman going to be able to cover this up for his mom? Or are they going to figure out what's going on? And
he is the kind, I think another thing in his performance that a lot of people have been chasing over the years is finding that line of just weird enough to still be charming even though you're involved in some heinous shit.
Yes.
That you're kind of like, oh, I kind of hope he gets away with it.
Yeah, that's sort of like there's something young and boyish about him. I think age-wise this is true. I could be wrong. But he reads as younger than Marion to me.
Interesting, yeah.
Like, she strikes me as a woman who's probably, you know, mid to late 20s, maybe 30. And Norman strikes me as like a 22-year-old.
Well, let's find out.
But I think he really uses that boyishness to his advantage.
Yeah, she's a few years older than him.
Yeah. And he looks so young.
Yes, he does.
Like he looks he's very clean cut.
He's very nicely dressed.
Yes. Yes, he's very put together. He's clean shaven. He's got a short haircut. Like, he looks like a good boy.
Yeah, another change from the book. In the book, he's kind of like a short, fat guy with balding and like a little bit more.
No, in this he's handsome.
Creepy,
he's like there's on first glance nothing that would tip you off there's anything going on with this guy.
Right.
And the only time he starts to snap at first is when Marion pushes him about his mom.
Yep.
About his mother. And the thing I love about that conversation, not to keep dwelling on it, when Marion implies maybe you should put her, quote unquote, somewhere. He says, oh, people always say somewhere. And what they mean is an institution. Mm-hmm. Do you know about those places? And then he starts going into detail.
Right.
What it's like in an institution. And it's like, wow, Norman, how would you know that?
I read a lot.
I went there on a field trip once. Like John Carpenter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The death of Arbogast is the next bit of
action,
explicit unreality too.
Yeah.
Because that's one thing. Actually, when I was younger, that moment turned me off quite a bit because I wasn't on the same wavelength as the movie.
The moment where it shows. Mother, quote unquote, coming out of the door,
specifically the way he falls down the stairs.
I can see that.
Because when I was younger, the first time I saw it, I was like, that's stupid. Like, it looks so dumb.
I can see that. There is still a little piece of me that sometimes when that scene happens, I think like, oh, that looks kind of hokey. You know, he's like windmilling his arms and going, whoa, as he goes down the stairs.
It is such an odd choice.
Yeah.
But it's one of those moments where he's going for the impression of the moment more than the reality of the moment.
Yeah, and the fact that if you were the one who'd just been stabbed by somebody coming out of a room out of nowhere and then you fell backwards down the stairs, shit would probably feel kind of unreal to you.
Yeah, is it The Exorcist that uses that? I think it's something we watched recently.
Yeah.
Uses that, like they lock the camera in front and then the guy falls backward. I think it might be The Exorcist. I can't
Get Out
remember.
kind of does it into the sunken place, but that's a very different vibe.
And the other moment that I really like that is just an odd, interesting choice. First of all, I think Sam and Lila actually have a lot more chemistry.
They do.
Yeah.
Which is always so weird. That's why I, like I said earlier, I had this weird like half suspicion that I was like, wait a minute, in this movie, is he actually in love with the sister? Because he does have so much more chemistry with her. They make a much better team.
It could be a Peter Bogdanovich situation where he does fall in love with the sister.
Oh.
Sorry, that's a weird joke to make.
Yeah.
Peter Bogdanovich. Let me push my glasses up here.
Oh boy.
Film director Peter Bogdanovich.
Yes, I am familiar.
Was married to, or I don't know if they were married, but he was in a relationship with a Playboy playmate who was murdered by her husband.
Oh.
So I guess they weren't married. Very famous. I can't remember the woman's name. Stratton? Dorothy Stratton.
Yeah.
After the death of Dorothy Stratton, Bogdanovich ended up in a relationship with Stratton's sister. So I'm just saying it's not entirely impossible that could have happened.
Sure.
So
that was a weird tangent.
Well, talking about dead ladies and their sisters. So.
Dead ladies and falling in love with sisters.
Yeah. But the other scene that I like that is, I have no idea why he does it this way, is when they have, excuse me, they have that conversation in the pitch black.
Yes.
Inside the hardware store.
Yep.
Where they're being lit from like the far door.
Yeah.
But everything else is in silhouette and shadow.
Yep.
And it's like there's no real reason to do this other than it looks cool.
Right.
And I can't remember what they're talking about, but maybe she wanted to be like, oh well, it's a low moment, so there's no light or whatever. But like he does that like in Vertigo. Mm-hmm. He plays with lights in a really weird way in that movie.
Yeah.
Where the first time fuck is his name? Jimmy Stewart sees the woman at the restaurant. She stops in front of the light, so she's being lit from behind, and then the light just gets really, really, really bright.
Yeah.
And there's another scene later on where this guy at a bookstore is explaining something to Jimmy Stewart, and the lights just dial down. When I saw it in the theater, I thought there was something wrong with the print.
Oh, wow.
Because it gets really, really dark,
Yeah.
and then as soon as his story's over, the lights come back up.
Huh.
It's very strange.
There's another weird moment in this movie that has less to do with light specifically, but it is definitely a weird choice. There's the conversation when Sam and Lila go to the sheriff's house.
Yep.
And there's Sam and Lila on one side, and there's the sheriff on the other, and the sheriff's wife is sort of in the middle. The camera keeps switching back and forth between Sam and Lila, the sheriff. Sam and Lila, the sheriff. The wife is always in the shot.
Is she really?
She's always in the shot,
that.
and she's in a slightly different position depending on which side
Interesting.
you're looking at. And it's so weird because I thought for a split like she's in the same position every time the camera goes back to Sam and Lila. Say her head is tilted slightly to the right and her lips are kind of pursed in concern. And then when it goes back to the sheriff, she's looking slightly towards the left and her face is more neutral.
Interesting.
And she's in the same position every time it goes to that shot, but the two positions are different. So for a split second when I watched this movie, I was like, are there two women?
So it looks like there's 5 people in the
Yes.
That's really funny.
Yeah, it's really weird. I don't know if they just spliced together to the best takes from each side of the conversation or something, and it was just like, good enough.
Yeah, I don't
But
know.
it has this really weird effect where you're like, the sheriff's wife has a doppelganger, and it's kind of off-putting when you watch it. Like, it makes that conversation feel really bizarre. Like, really weird. And it's the conversation where Sam and Lila keep insisting, the private investigator went up to the Bates Motel and Mrs. Bates is there. And they're like, she couldn't be.
Right.
And they're like, no, she was there. And they keep insisting until they say, well, she died 10 years ago. And the wife is like, yeah, I helped pick out the dress. It was periwinkle blue. And it's such a weird scene altogether that it's just like, what is happening here?
It's the first of 2 scenes in the movie that I think are bummers. Like,
Yeah.
Anytime this movie gets into exposition, really drags things down. But I'm glad you brought it up.
Yes.
Because you know how much that I don't like cop plots in movies.
I know you do not.
Well, in his famous interviews with Sir Alfred Hitchcock, Francois Truffaut, who was a fan of the movie, commented that the scenes with the sheriff were a letdown. Hitchcock replied, "The sheriff's intervention comes under the heading of what we have discussed many times before. Why don't they go to the police? I've always replied, they don't go to the police because it's dull. Here is a perfect example of what happens when they go to the police."
Yeah.
Alfred Hitchcock didn't like cop plots either.
You can tell. There's not a ton of them in a lot of
Rubber
his movies.
stamped, my opinion, rubber stamped by one of the greatest. He came to me.
Does that elevate you to that level?
He came to me, tears in his eyes. He said, "Clay, cop plots are bad." One of the
then
greats.
he wiped
We all
those
love
tears on your cape.
We all love Alfred Hitchcock. He's doing a lot of great things. That was my non-voice Trump impression.
I was just thinking the same thing.
Yeah, so we get through that scene, and then the reveal of the mother, fantastic.
Oh, it's so good.
You know, the other thing that I noticed that was when Arbogast goes to when he ends up getting killed.
Yeah.
He pulls up to the motel, and you see Norman walking down the line of rooms.
Yeah.
And so I found myself thinking, how the fuck did he get into the house before Arbogast? Because Arbogast goes into the office, and so Norman should be over here, but somehow he beats him back into the house, changes into Mother, and then kills him.
Yeah.
They actually answer that question in the last sequence because Lila ends up running down that direction.
Yeah.
And there's a split where she can go behind the rooms and go up to the house.
Oh.
And so I'm assuming
Yeah. Yeah, he could have just...
that's what Norman did.
Yep.
But the reveal of the mother is fantastic, and the slow turn is great, and it's just...
Especially since you've been hearing her voice this whole time.
Yeah.
Like, you've been seeing her, sort of, and you've been hearing the voice, and then to have that turn, and it's just that desiccated corpse face with no eyes and the teeth all exposed staring at you. It's so good.
And she smacks the light with her hand, which is great. And,
right.
It's
she being Lila, not the corpse of the mother.
Unfortunately.
No, it's not that movie.
It's just very, very well choreographed. Like
and then
else.
Having Anthony Perkins as Norman, as mother, just come into the doorway in the full dress and wig with this big fucking smile on his face and the knife raised high, and he looks so excited that he's going to stab another one. Like, he looks so insane.
Yes, he does.
It's so great.
Yeah. Then unfortunately, the other thing it would be different if they made this now is Sam Loomis definitely dies.
Yeah.
Like, Loomis dies, and then Lila has to.
Yeah, and it's just Lila playing cat and mouse with Mother all through the house.
Yeah, that's how these things evolve.
Mother.
But yeah, so they capture him, and then we get to the worst scene in the movie, which is where
surprise, surprise, full of cops.
Yes, full of cops, and a psychiatrist.
Yes,
who walks out.
Clay does not agree with.
I think it's fake science. No, this psychiatrist walks out and just starts psychoanalyzing.
He's had like 5 minutes to talk to Norman/Mother.
And he's doing it in a way that doesn't sound natural, and it just sounds like he's reading it out of a book.
Yeah, like it feels like somebody said, "Look, people aren't going to get it. People aren't going to get it.
Right.
You need to spell it out really clearly for them to make sure that they get it. So we need this guy who is a doctor to start saying all the things to make sure the audience understands."
Well, that is true. That is what the studio said. Hitchcock did not like this scene either. Once again, my opinion rubber stamped by great.
Are you just trying to say you are the reincarnation of Alfred Hitchcock?
I think I'm about 1.5 feet taller than he is.
At least.
But we might weigh the same.
You have much, much better hair.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, thank you. Similar silhouettes, I think. But,
no. Disagree, but
but yeah, it's kind of a bummer of a scene. But honestly, they really pull the plane up at the end with that final scene with Norman, where
it is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Where he is now fully Mother, and I even love when the cops come in and they say, "Excuse me, he's a bit chilly. Can we bring him a blanket?" Because that is 100% what a little old lady would be like. It's chilly.
There is one thing that the doctor says that I do like, where he says he's talking about the split personality thing.
Yeah.
And he says he was never 100% Norman, but often he was 100% Mother.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. But yeah, when they give him the blanket and he's in the room alone and there's that monologue moment that, again, in my opinion, kind of mirrors him to Marion. We're the only two characters you really get an inner monologue from are Marion and Norman. Yeah. And it's Mother saying, "Well, I'm just going to sit here and they can't do anything to me. I'm a harmless old lady. They're going to see how nice and harmless I am." It's so good. And
the last shot where it's a close-up on him, and then they do this dissolve to the car being pulled out, and they do that quick superimposition of Mother's face over his face.
Yep.
Excellent.
And one of the things that I love about this movie is that you walk away with all of these kind of impressions and maybe questions. And at least for me, it wasn't until I had a little bit of time to process that I started thinking about what was Norman's relationship with his mother really like? And I know that that's the inspiration for that whole Bates Motel TV show that was out a few years ago.
Yes.
But in this movie, you get Norman and then Norman's illness as Mother.
Mm-hmm.
I know the implication is that he is just 100% emulating his mother.
Right. The way that she treated him caused this personality split.
But there's kind of don't know. They don't really come out and say that. There's no way to know that. And I find that stuff really interesting. Like I'm glad they don't try to answer that. I'm glad there's no flashback of mother abusing him something.
The closest you get is, do they specifically call out an Oedipus complex? I think they do. Maybe not. I can't remember.
Do.
You know what? No, that's in the book.
Yeah, I don't think
in the
they
book
do.
there's a lot of inner monologue for Norman.
Yeah.
And it says, like, I've read the books. But I think what in the movie, what you're getting is you're clearly getting some sort of inappropriate relationship on his end, some sort of Oedipal relationship, because he freaks out when his mother gets remarried or is going to get remarried, and he kills them both.
Right.
And so, like, his what's the word I'm looking for? Repression and embarrassment with sex stuff.
Yep.
Doesn't necessarily have to be something that was imposed on him.
Right.
But it's something that he just naturally feels.
Right, or maybe it was. Maybe he was raised in a really conservative and kind of limited way, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it was in the same way that his brain has twisted it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I really like that about this movie. I like that it leaves Norman and his mother's actual backgrounds just sort of open. Like, you can infer a bunch of stuff from it. You can make some pretty solid assumptions probably, but they don't go into it. You know, there's no like, well, you know, his mother did this and then he did that and then he did this and his mother did that. Like, it's just like, no, they've lived there for a long time. The sheriff knows who he is.
Yeah.
Like, is familiar with the family. There weren't any signs. Like this small town has just kind of, whatever warning signs they had about Norman, they just ignored them.
Yeah. I do think it's strange. I don't know how close or far the Bates Motel is from anything.
Yeah.
Like, that sheriff seems to know him.
Yeah.
But there's no implication that it's just
they
like...
say it's like 10 miles
it's 10 miles from downtown,
Fairview or whatever it is, the little town that Sam lives in.
Oh, does he live there? Oh, that's right. Okay.
Yeah, that's why
that makes sense.
That's why she's heading that way. He runs the Fairview hardware store.
I couldn't remember if it was the same. I just remember him saying that there's a diner 10 miles up the road.
Fairview.
In Fairview. Okay.
Yep.
I do find it funny that in the subsequent sequels they've made. So
I've never seen any of the sequels.
The second one is probably worth watching.
Okay.
Written by the guy who wrote Fright Night.
Oh, okay.
I think. He either wrote it or directed it. I can't remember which one.
Either one. He's fun.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where Psycho isn't. It was an untouchable movie for 20 years.
Yeah.
Like, you only get Psycho 2 what year was that?
Psycho 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah, basically. Psycho 2 was 83. Okay, so
wow,
it's 23 years.
Wow.
Which, as we all know, as students of the Rotten Horror Picture Show, 1983, right in the pocket of the slasher boom.
Oh yeah.
So
we've
obviously
had at least 4 Friday the 13th at this point.
Yeah. So obviously, you're bringing out the old guard.
Yes.
The granddaddy of them all, if you will.
Yes.
Convincing Anthony Perkins to play this character again. He actually was in 3 sequels. Is that true? No, he was in 2. He was in Psycho 2. No, he was in 3. He was in Psycho 2. He directed and starred in Psycho 3.
Oh wow!
And I believe he was also in Psycho 4. Then there was a first attempt at a Bates Motel show, which is really interesting because it's one of those shows / movies that I thought I had dreamt.
Oh yeah.
Because I think this was the same trip where I saw Legend for the first time, which was another movie I thought that I had dreamt.
Trip like you went somewhere, or trip like you were on something?
Who's to say, honestly? But I remember watching on TV this show.
Yeah.
I think it was a movie that took place at Bates Motel, but I could never place what it was.
Nice.
It was in my head. I had this memory of it.
Yeah.
That it had, I think Jason Bateman is in it.
What?
Yeah, which in my head I was like, it's the guy from Teen Wolf 2. I know that. And it was this really weird kind of surreal thing that existed in my mind. Much years later, Lori Petty's in it too, I think.
Oh.
Years later, I found out that it was a failed attempt to do a Bates Motel TV show. And so they put it out as a TV movie, which I think they called Bates Motel. I can't remember. But what I find hilarious is, and then of course they did the show. They successfully did Bates Motel, which ran for like three or four seasons.
I think it's like 5.
Is it 5? I watched all of them. I can't remember.
I only am thinking this because I briefly Googled last night.
Yeah.
And it was like,
I think you're right.
2013 to 2018 or something like that.
There might have been a big gap between seasons, but I think you're right. I think it's closer to 5.
Yeah.
Not a great show. However, the relationship between Norma and Norman in that show, excellent. Like, it's worth watching just for them.
Okay.
But circle back around. What I find hilarious is when they do these sequels, which generally have a lot of prequel elements built into them. Psycho 2 has a lot of prequel stuff in it.
Okay.
I can see someone going, so Norman's mom was young enough that she was going to get remarried. So she was probably hot, right?
Yeah.
Like hot enough that her son would like want to do her. So in Psycho 2,
oh God,
Norma Bates is played by Olivia Hussey from Black Christmas. And in Bates Motel, she's played by Vera Farmiga. Both very beautiful women who are not senior citizens.
Right, they are not grandmotherly.
But in this movie, I always think like she, based on the corpse anyway, it seems like she...
And the voice.
Yeah, she died 10 years ago.
Right.
I assume that she, you can get married at any age. Who's to say she wasn't 60?
Yeah, I don't think this movie cares much.
No. Anyway.
Yeah.
They famously did some William Castle-esque advertising stuff for this, where when the movie came out, they did not allow people to come in after it had started.
Which was kind of like a revolutionary thing back then, right? It used to be that you could just sort of buy a movie ticket for whatever was playing and wander in.
Yeah, I guess people they would wander in like the middle of the movie and then stay through up to the point that they missed in the next play.
Right, because it was just sort of like, this is what we're playing in theater 2 today.
Which is insane to me.
Yeah.
how do you, what's the point of having a narrative? Anyway. And what was the other thing they did? There was a lot of stuff about not sharing the ending, and it's an interesting movie because like I think for maybe the first time in history, all of that stuff 100% warranted.
right. It's not the same as the sort of what was it? Was it The Exorcist and other stuff where they'd have a nurse in the lobby and like an ambulance waiting outside and things like that, where it was sort of gimmicky and designed to drum up this feeling of like, ooh, if it's bad enough, they need like medical personnel on site. It's got to be crazy.
Handing out barf bags or something.
Right. Yeah. Instead, this one was like, no, there's actual reasons why you need to come in when it starts, and when it ends and you leave, don't tell people the plot. Yeah. Like it
apparently, and I don't know if this is apocryphal or not, when Hitchcock read the book, he supposedly anonymously purchased the rights and then attempted to buy up as many copies of it as he could find to stop people from reading it, so they wouldn't know what the ending was. I don't know if that's actually true, but
no idea.
What apparently is true is that this was a pretty big risk for him.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he did was he actually took a big cut in his salary because they didn't want to give him the budget that he wanted.
Yeah.
And instead he took 60% back end gross. So he made a lot of money on this movie.
Wow.
Because this was a very big hit.
Yeah.
And has remained so for the better part of 50... Are we in 60? We not past 60 yet, are we? 20? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess we are.
Yeah.
So yeah. Psycho. Pretty good movie. Number 7 on our list.
Yes.
How do you feel about that placement?
I would like it to be in the top 5.
Well, it was.
I know.
Until the friggin' list had an aneurysm.
I know, and I understand the argument that it's technically not that scary for modern audiences.
Yeah.
But I will continue to make my screaming plea that the ramifications down the line through time, through the genre, warrant certain movies being regarded closer to number 1 than others. And I don't think you would have the vast majority of modern horror movies. I don't think would exist without Psycho.
No, I don't think so either. It's what are we doing in the 60s?
Not much.
I agree. It doesn't really come back around until the late 60s, early 70s. No, I'm sorry. Late 70s with Halloween. Well, no, let me rephrase that. Early 70s.
Yeah.
Black Christmas, Texas Chainsaw, 1974. This is the 50th anniversary of those movies.
Hey.
But yeah, through the 60s, you're not getting a lot of these. It doesn't start like a boom of this kind of movie. You're actually still working in a lot of supernatural stuff.
Yeah, but you
still
can
going pretty
tell
strong.
that there's a lot of people who watched this movie when they were 12,
13,
100%, 14, 15.
100%, yes.
And it just imprinted itself fully on their brains.
100%, yes. It's a great one. Highly recommend if you haven't seen it. And if you have seen it and you didn't love it, give it another watch. Because there's, again, what I'm learning, Alfred Hitchcock movies, pretty weird.
Weird and surprisingly funny.
Yes.
There's a lot of one-liners or throwaway dialogue in this movie, or little like sight gags and things that are actually really fun.
I would like to watch more of his movies because I haven't seen that many.
Well, Clay.
I know you have the set.
Yes, I do.
I especially would like to rewatch North by
Mom.
Northwest because I hated that movie.
Really?
Really disliked it.
Okay.
I'm interested to see if it has the same things in it that I have learned to like, that I've picked up from Vertigo and I feel like Vertigo and Psycho and The Birds are his 3 weirdest movies. So maybe I'm not.
I don't know.
Maybe I'm not going to get any weird stuff from the other ones.
Some of the other ones are pretty weird.
We just recently watched Body Double.
Oh, I haven't seen that one.
So we should talk if you watch it. It is Brian De Palma, known for being a Hitchcock enthusiast.
I was going to say a total madman.
That too.
Yeah.
And this is Body Double is basically like he said, people keep saying this about me, so fuck it, I'm just going to do it. And it's like almost literally Vertigo and Rear Window mashed together.
Weird.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like even down to the fact that the main character has like he's a claustrophobic, and so which comes into play in the plot. But yeah, it's an interesting watch where he's doing the Hitchcock thing like as overtly as one could possibly do it.
Yeah.
But he clearly knows that he's doing that.
Right. It's intentional. It's a choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Okay.
It also, little bit part, goes with the Gozerian from Ghostbusters.
Hey.
Yeah. Anyway.
Everyone's favorite Gozerian.
Thank you guys for listening. If you'd like to help support the show, head over to patreon.com/The Penske File, where you can follow along on our coverage of Halloween this year.
Join us.
If all of the allusions we made to it seemed interesting, you can get the same deep, insightful commentary on the next 11 Halloween movies on patreon.com.
Come listen to us slowly go insane as we go through another long series.
If you want to check in,
it's been a couple years since we did.
If you want to check in around June, around Halloween 6, to hear me go, I think this franchise might be a mistake, that's the time to do it. So, thank you guys for supporting the show. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Clay.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Oh, our next movie.
Right.
So Amanda is leaving us.
We continue to do these.
Amanda is leaving us briefly.
Goodbye, my friends.
So we're playing a little fast and loose with our randomizer here, but Amanda will be joining us for one more, I believe.
I think so.
And then we will have a couple guest hosts.
Yes.
But our next film will be Reanimator.
I am so excited.
Number 40. Have you seen Reanimator?
Yeah,
Okay.
but a long time ago.
Cool. Great. Well, I was just thinking because it's actually an interesting one to watch next because the music in Reanimator is to the Psycho music that Ice Ice Baby is to Under Pressure.
Oh, God, I can't wait.
Yeah.
It's going to be fun.
Reanimator, it's going to be a good time. So we will see you next time with Reanimator. Bye, guys.
Bye.